Okay. Hello. Kind of a bit of a weird one, right? Not a game, but I thought I would do a. Since got some nice feedback yesterday on a longsword training session, I'm just going to quickly go over some basics and what I can remember from when I was fencing. So this is a longsword, and the fencing style I've been learning is the German method, and it's from the tutor Liechtenauer. Right. So I have got some notes. I'll preface this by saying that. There we go. So I just don't want to forget, because I'm sure I will. Keep you all interested so you can keep watching. Whoa, there we go. Alright, so I have to throw in a disclaimer at the beginning. One, there's a few different teachings of longsword. I mentioned earlier, this is particularly the specific German style of Liechtenauer. There are Italian and other variants. I'm also a learner. I've only been practicing for about half a year, so I'm not a teacher or trained, but I'll tell you what I know. There's, and also the way that this has been sort of discovered over time is it only really exists in drawings and really kind of cryptic poems or like kind of artworks. So there'd be a lot of like really over the top drawings of people doing things like this, and it would say something in medieval German like "he who betwixt his brow too high." I made that up, but I'll move out to like try and work out what all that means. So I'll get into the fun bits now, and I say fun bits. I'm going to very quickly, because I'm sure everyone here is just wanting to see a few stabs. So you can practice this at home if you've got anything like this, right? Ideally you want something, and this is kind of the first bit. So you see the hilt here, or the grip, however you want to call it. You see it's kind of this shape. It's not round, and that's, you want to have your hand in. Sorry, my left and right's are backwards. You have to hold your hand in this position rather than like that. So you're going to kind of cup it, and it's kind of all your fingers are pointing out, and that's when you bring your hand over, and that's quite important actually for a lot of movement later on. Just very quickly, and I'll briefly explain why that's the case actually. So holding it like this, one of the guards in particular is, I believe it's called a Schildhau. Forgive my pronunciation, but if I held my sword here, this is a defense I've got, and by rotating my wrist I've now covered my other side. You see that? Very easy to do. If I held it like a hammer, I've got a good solid grip of it, I am stuck here. I can't do a full rotation without extending the rest of my body. And that kind of weight distribution of where your shoulders are in proportion to your feet, I'll quickly shake my feet about so you can see. You kind of need to make sure that's all good. And again, on just holding it like this also kind of brings in the true edge and the false edge. So one side of this blade, the one pointing out, I'm going to get this wrong, so feel free to get in the comments. I believe this is strong and this is true. No wait, true and false. That's because you can do a strike like this. Right, I'll teach this one as well. That's the most standard basic one. I think that's just called I think it's a Zornhau, but they're all in German. They're a bit weird to remember. But equally having it in a slightly different style. So this edge, you can also do a strike that's like that. So it does make sense. I'll show you why that's useful later on. But holding it like this so you can get a full rotation around from one guard to the next, that's very important. And feet placement, I can stand on the bed probably. Nope, I can't do that. I'll just bring my camera down. I apologise for this budget. I don't have anything professional. Alright, you can kind of see this. So you have your left leg forwards, and that's when you plant down, and your right leg is the one that you're going to want a lot of flexibility with. And as you stand in a guard, all your weight, or most of it, is kind of planted on this back leg, and that's so you can kind of spring forward, and that's how you can do a lot of strikes from a standing position. if that follows. And as you're stepping forwards, if you're bringing your feet in, oh wait, I should cover this. So imagine you're on a clock. Your front leg goes straight forwards, pointing to your opponent at like 12 o'clock, and your right leg kind of comes out at 45 degrees from that. So maybe around, what is that, like half one? No, 45 degrees ish, and it's kind of roughly shoulder width. And as you're coming in, you can kind of step, and then you come back in with your other foot. You don't want to fully enclose your feet like this, right? And this is exactly why, because now I have a central point of balance, whereas this is quite strong, and you can just quickly jump back. And this way, if you need to retreat, very easy to do. If I was here, I'd be whoa. So hopefully that's covered the really boring bits of sword fighting. Boring to most people. It was to me when I first started anyway. I was like, I just want to swing the sword around, let me do it. Stop telling me how to stand. But it really is important. So some other bits, important parts of sword fighting, particularly with longsword. There's two halves of a sword, and I'll go through all parts of the sword in a second for anyone who is new. But I'm out of breath from jumping. From the top half of the sword, this is your weakest part, and the bottom half of the sword, or the blade, that's your strongest part. And this is because if you are, I'll use my scabbard as an opponent, if you're in like a clash and your swords have clashed, this is called a bind, and it's when you're kind of doing this grinding to see who gets the power. There's kind of a struggle in a fight, and it's who pushes the other one out of the way first, really, kind of basics. But if you know anything about physics, right, these are two long levers, these are big pivots, and they move very freely. But if my sword is right at its strong part and lower part, I can very quickly move that, and I can't even push myself back really easily. And it's kind of that power and weight distribution of where you're holding the sword. So if you've got a good guard, right, I'm going to squat a bit, then if the opponent's sword is here, I can just very quickly kind of push them out the way. But if I'm right on the end, I'm going to get swinged back. And that's some other bits, and I'll go through the full parts of the sword now. So everyone will know bits of this. This horizontal beam here is a crossguard on this sword in particular. That's because it looks a bit like a crucifix, right? Possibly due to Crusaders and Catholicism. Oop. And the end bits here are called quillins. You see, I've rounded quillins, and this is because I got this sword commissioned, especially made it so it doesn't quite rub in my shoulder in a weird way. This is the grip, or the handle, or the hilt, whatever, and this bit is the pommel. And this acts as a counterbalance for the rest of the weight of the sword. So you see the kind of center of balance is roughly here. Right, I could hold this, I'm kind of more near the hilt, right? And that's just so it's easier in the hand. You've got this kind of pivot point of here, as opposed to somewhere in the middle. Alright, so I'll go through some actual sword stuff now. So the mechanical weight is important, but of like your biomechanical weight, but also sort of in dueling and fighting there's a lot of giving and taking, so you're not really going to be able to pull off a quick flurry usually. I mean, if you're good you can, but assuming the other person knows what they're doing, you go for a move and they're going to block it, and then they're going to go for you and you block it, so it's kind of this 1-2 1-2. So as I'm in a guard, which you want to start in a guard usually, unless you want to be like, oh, come and get me. But if I'm starting in a guard, and this is I think this is a guard called Langen Ort, just long point. You point your sword out as far as you can really, but you want control of it, and that's basically you're like tempting your opponent to get your sword. But what you can do is very quickly do some moves on that. Right. I've never moved so much in like the past 9 months. Okay, so rule number 1, the sword fighting: always keep your tip of your blade to your opponent. So in this case I'm going to be pointing like to the neck, and you probably strike from the right shoulder in any of your slashes. You don't want to go for the head because people can duck, but if you're going down, generally you'll always like somehow get them. And this only really works with unarmoured opponents as well. I'll show you some moves towards the end of how to get through armour with swords in particular. So the key point is staying on the target. And any move I do, like pretend your sword is glued to your opponent's like neck or like throat here. Pretend it's glued, and whenever you move it, it moves around the axis. I'm not very good at keeping it in the same spot, but I'm trying to keep it like in the middle of this stream. I'll point it towards my camera, that's probably easier to do. And that's just in case if at any moment anything happens, they're going to run into your sword, right? But also it means if you ever need like jabs, you're going to get someone. Right. Sorry, I do have now a bit of something to do. Okay, I wrote some notes. And dodging, this is an important method as well. I will get onto sword moves in just 1 second. I just have to cover these foundations, but dodging is, there's a lot of sidestepping really, but you're not stepping, it's not like a strafe. I don't step. Imagine your opponent is in the center of your circle and then you're moving around them like this. So if they're coming for me with a standard big swing, you see my arms are fully extended now. Look, keep this image in mind, and now as I circle around, their arm is still like there, extended. As I'm coming around, I can do a big step. I won't bother with the footwork, so even I forget it. And then there's this move where you kind of push your left hand back, you push the sword away from you, so you're in this position. And this is called a crump power. And what you're doing is you're aiming for your opponent's hands, wrist or arm as they're in this position. So they're there, you're in the open, but you've moved away and you've hopefully got the hand, and then you might even just have won that battle really. There are some defences which they don't do. So some guards, I'll have to bring my camera up for this. Some guards. There's a really common, easy one. It's called the ox guard. It kind of looks like, oh, hello. So you can disarm them. Yeah, hello, welcome to the chat. Yeah, dishand them, disarm. There's all kinds of techniques with that. But the ox guards are these ones. I will go through various. So holding it like this, in the normal way, you want to do the same thing as like pushing your arm through, but you want to do that to create an X pattern on your right side. And you can hold that quite high and keep your point down. And this covers you for a large amount of like aerial attacks. But also there's some moves you can do from there. And you can also mirror that, but do this position with your hands. So in this case, you pull your lower left hand up like this. They do get a bit tricky to remember, but those are two guards. And depending which manuscript you read and what country you're in, what language you speak, you might look like this, or you might look like something like that. But up to you. Everyone's style is a bit different, and it really does vary. So another guard. I'm gonna have to crouch for this one. There's hive on top, which is essentially just bringing it over your head, and it's this really threatening, like really powerful thing. And the only move you can really do is straight down, right? So you're very clearly indicating an attack. But this, it looks silly, but it's a really important part of the guards. Another guard is Flug, which I'm saying the German names because I don't know the other ones, but so this is a kind of your starting resting position sometimes, but Flug is where you kind of bring it down to your belt and then tip it 45 degrees. So it's different to the long point, but it's kind of this, you're keeping yourself a bit close. Now these might vary according to how much I've remembered them, but the concept is there, right? I've covered the long point a little bit earlier, so I'll skip that one. And then the other one is the Fool Guard. Excuse the alcoholic beverages. Right. The Fool's Guard is where you look like a fool. So I'm holding my sword. I'm wearing all black, so you can't quite get a good view of this. But you just hold it down. You just kind of do this with it, and you can kind of just relax. But you obviously want to look like this. And what you're doing is you're telling your opponent, or you want them to think, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm not going to defend myself. And there's a lot of really quick moves you can. I mean, a lot of it's all rotating your hand. So the same way as doing ox guards, you know, from this position you pull left or you pull right. It's the same thing here. You pull right, and I'm now in an ox guard. Equally, if they're just running at you, you just go bop. They run right into you, and you can do what you like with that afterwards. But that's one of my favourite ones. Okay, let's scroll down my to-do list, because I'm sure I would forget stuff. Right. There's only one kind of attack I can remember really. So, well, there's a couple. So this is your most basic one. From your default resting position, you kind of bring your sword down and then tip it towards them, and then you kind of do this with a step, right? So that's kind of a 3-in-1, and you do your step last. So now I've done a couple sword things. I can show some more boring bits. So with your stepping, you only want to step and push forwards after you do your sword. So there's a good way of remembering is you are doing your attack, but then you want your sword to pull you as you step. So I don't want to move attack, because they're going to see my foot go and go, well, he's going to attack me. So if I'm very quick, and then imagine you're swinging it with full force, I'm going to inevitably come with it. And that's the kind of feeling you want with it. So there's also, I've just forgotten what I was going to say. But this Vert is another attack, and this is a pretty popular one. I call it like a helicopter kind of move. I'll stand here. So you can stay in an ox guard, I think, for this. But what you're doing is you're swinging it towards yourself, over your head, and just converting to another guard. So if that makes sense, I'm just changing guard mid-air, ox to ox. And this also is a good strike, and you can kind of get some necks or heads with that. What's some other ones? Well, I'll go through one of the guards again. So I can keep my guard here, which is pretty well defended. But if they're coming from something there, I can very easily bring my sword here, and that's through this method of just rotating my wrist, kind of 180 almost. And then from there, you can bring up an attack like this, and you can kind of step with that. Okay, so that's about all I can remember for now. So I've got some extras written down, some extra like cool bits and tidbits. If I remember anything else on the way, I'll do them. And I'm doing this so I don't touch the sword, right? Because it's not stainless steel, right? It's actually quite nice steel. I've just cleaned it. So one move that I mentioned earlier to like get through someone wearing armor is half swording. So you see I'm holding my sword like this. I'm holding it halfway up to the blade. And what this does is, just like the whole using your origin points, is now the sword essentially is shorter. I've turned it into a dagger. I mean, you can hold it here if you want, or about halfway, wherever. But now if I wanted to, say, get between something, if I move my hand, the balance point is now like here. It's rotating around this. Like a bit like snooker, maybe, right? So now I can very easily, precisely point this in the right way. Whereas if I wanted to go in between somebody's like helmet visor, doing this with a very long, heavy, it's wobbling, right? So that's a good way of getting around that. And then there's also another grip, which, again, you hold your sword blade side only, right, like this, and left and right. And this essentially turns your sword into like a big mace, right? And Mordhau grip, it's like means death blow or something, death grip. But it's that kind of strike. Oh, that did remind me of another move. I'll show you that. But I'll quickly go on to why this is safe, or why this isn't as dangerous to do. You'd think holding a sword is really dangerous, but barehanded, this is possible. Hopefully you're wearing gloves though, sort of in any kind of situation. But if you say hold a kitchen knife or a sharp blade, and if you squeeze really hard, it's going to dig in, right? But you might not cut yourself. You can hold it pretty firmly. But until you start like shaking your hand up and down the blade, then it'll start to cut in as you build up that movement. Like if you're cutting a steak, Like if you're having dinner with a steak, if you just like push your knife in, it's gonna like press. You need the sawing motion. So as long as you don't do this, as long as you keep a good grip and you make sure it doesn't move about, you can be fine. But also, if it costs you a cut palm and then someone else has got a brain concussion and you can save your own life, it's that kind of trade-off. A lot of this medieval combat is sort of what's worth more, like a bit of me getting hurt or me looking a bit silly versus like actually living through this. Okay, and then yeah, I'll show you the pommel strikes, which I'm going to come into now. So all parts of the sword are a weapon. You saw this could be used in the other grip, and even the pommel can be used as a hefty weight. And this is because in a lot of longsword fighting, there's a lot of this sparring and kind of trying to get control of the middle, and I think they call it fooling, and it's where you're feeling where the power struggle is between your strong and weak, and you can bring sword up and down to kind of control that movement. But if you're getting really close, and just like traditional wrestling, think of it like judo. A lot of moves kind of require you to grapple, or if they're coming in with a big swing and they're bringing their weight with it, if you put a leg behind them, you know, when you trip people up and you push them over your leg as they're moving, then they're going to fall over and you're still standing, and you can kind of do what you like with that. So that's kind of the wrestling side of it. But if you're getting kind of in this really close-up bit, you can kind of grab their sword sometimes, move it out of the way, or give it a good smack if they're kind of here, and then the sword bounces. And with your other hand, you can come back to your sword or do what you like, but you can lift it like this, and you can give them a nasty knock right to the face, or just do a jab, or whatever kind of works. See, it's kind of in a lot of martial arts, right? There's that joke of you could learn karate for self-defense, but you just gotta hope whoever's attacking you also knows karate. So it's like, karate's fine as long as someone doesn't just knock you out in one go, right? So as long as someone else knows the fighting style, you probably will be able to do all these same moves because they know the moves as well. But someone who's not trained will just I mean, you see kids with swords, right? They kind of just go like that, like cut them, do it. But actually that is one of the most basic guards which you can like defend from really quickly. So if you're trained, you should be fine. And that's kind of the foundation of this is the elites learning how to fight a bit more and just knowing how to react differently in the moment. And there's kind of grappling and last minute changing of plans, of just giving someone a nasty knock there, kind of all this turning it around and doing this. There's all these kind of things in the moment that you just kind of do. So I'm out of breath. It's been 20 minutes. I think that's all I can basically remember. If there's any questions about longsword, because I will wrap this up and then people can watch this sort of not live, because I know Twitch is weird. But should I summarise anything? I think there's a few things I forgot, but I might do another one of these. I'll just quickly demo some moves while we wait for chat to pick up. This is a shield tower. That's a good standard guard there. This is like a long point, Langenort. These are some ox guards, and then you can kind of bring it here. You always keep your point on the opponent. There's a lot of stepping, which, yep, excuse the mess. How do you bring down? Don't know. Right, I lost if I don't. But you kind of do this staggered step, like you're pacing. You can do that really quick, and whenever you strike as well, you want your sword to pull you into the fray. Now you don't want to go, because then you're signalling. So it's like this: you step right at the last moment. Getting the timing right is quite difficult, but hopefully that was enjoyable. I'm going to play some more, like Kingdom Come Deliverance or Minecraft or something. I might wear my armor for it. I could get that out now. I'll be authentic. Here we go. Ouch. Okay. So, right, the problem with this, and I've touched upon this again earlier, Like, how silly do you look or how hurt do you get versus how much do you want to survive? And this is really interesting sort of back and forth. So I can't see very well at all out of this. I get a very thin slither, as you can imagine. So if I'm in combat, I can't, like, oh actually I can do this. Like, my hands are here. I can't see my hands until I'm here, which is maybe like a 70-degree, maybe that. It's not quite the, no, maybe I'm like 90 degrees vision. Not quite the 180 which I normally get. But getting through this slit, if I was fully armoured up, right, and the only slit was here, or indeed the armpits, and you want to get a poke in my eyes, it's very difficult to do. So this is where the half swording, holding the sword halfway up the blade can come in useful. I can very easily get more balance on this now and get me right between the eyes. But equally, the like judo style of combat, of throwing somebody off their balance when you're in combat, or you can even use your sword to kind of get behind them and kind of tussle them. So someone's here, my hand is that person, and I can kind of just sort of use my own power and they go down, or you can stick a leg behind them. Then it's very easy to either do this or go for your dagger that's hopefully here, and pretend this sword is a lot smaller. You bring up your dagger like this in a ice pick kind of grip, and you can very quickly do this without having to like flip it and then do that again. So yeah, there's a longsword tutorial. It's covered about 27 minutes. Hello Edge, yeah, there is a crazy man with a sword. These are legal to own in the UK, they're not legal to take outside. But I believe in Texas and America you can have open carry swords. There we go. It's a scabbard a friend made with me, for me rather. So, hope that was educational. Thanks for watching. I'm going to end the stream in about 20 seconds maybe. And then feel free to watch this back if you missed the beginning or anything. And if you want proper lessons, you can look around your local area for HEMA groups. That's HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. There might be something in your area. Well, it might open again soon at least. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube by actual trained teachers, but here's a live one for you. Here's a live one from someone who half knows what he's doing. Can't win in a real fight, but I can certainly swing a sword. Okay, well, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. I'm gonna play a game in a few minutes. Stick around for that. Alright, see ya, thanks.